let's start with the biggest news
Mm,
of the episode, I'd say, is we have a Stanley Cup champion.
we do.
In in their sixth year of existence, the Vegas Golden Knights are Stanley Cup champions.
They did it. The
And
long wait for the
the long
fans.
wait.
They've been wanting this forever, but they
Bill
got it
Foley
done.
said it. Bill Foley said it. He said when he purchased the team, even though he didn't purchase the team, he purchased the expansion fee or whatever. He said they were going to win the cup within 6 years, and they just did it. They beat the they did, that's true. They beat the Florida Panthers in 5 games, and in Game 5 they beat them 9-3.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
That, I've just been thinking about this is the big thing. I know we're gonna get more to details, but on
Yeah.
Florida's side of things, after the second period, like what can Paul Maurice tell the team in between the periods? Like it's 6-1.
Yeah, no, that's a tough one. I don't know what you could say other than to me, and listen, I'm not a coach, so that's why I'm giving this answer. Um, it was a good year. They whether I mean, listen, I think the Panthers, the players themselves have said, everyone really didn't expect us to make it this far. And myself included, did not expect them to make it this far. So I would argue it's been a hell of a run, and we can look at uh, specific players who helped them get there along the way, including one Sergei Bobrovsky, Matthew Tkachuk coming up clutch in especially in the third round against the Carolina Hurricanes. But again, like no one expected them to get this far. No one expected them to get out of the first round when they were down
Mm,
3-1 to the President's Trophy, one of the greatest teams, one of the greatest regular season
regular
teams
season teams, yes.
of all time, Boston Bruins.
We have to
So
remember who ended that series for them.
who was it?
Friend of the show. Well, not really a friend of the show, but deep in our hearts, Leafs legend Carter Verhaeghe.
Damn it, Daniel. Damn it. Damn it. We've been recording for 5 minutes and his
Oh
name has
my
been brought up.
gosh, I
That's
love the
okay.
guy.
It's a name of the past for Leaf fans,
Hmm.
as I was putting it. Um, what did you think? I mean, like, listen, we can break down by game, but I just curious to know what you thought of the series as a whole, because a lot of people went into the series saying, I think a lot of people went into it dissing the two teams that made it, and I mean, some of the TV numbers that have come out since Game 5 have shown that the viewership wasn't as high. But do you think it was as quote unquote boring as people said it was, or you think it was exciting?
I think okay. There's two things here. I think for me, it was that we don't always see this all the time, but the NBA finals going hand in hand with the NHL finals, right? Like usually there's a bit of a gap in between the games, but for me, watching both series, I think it was the difference in narrative. For the NBA, I think there was two things you can really cheer for. I guess number one, Miami being a big market, you're of course going to get more of the viewers for that one, especially someone who is as I guess infamous or famous as you want to see it, like Jimmy Butler,
Mm-hmm.
someone who can perform like that, has that personality. And then on Denver side of it, it's just kind of like, are they finally going to get it done? First championship. Nikola Jokic, arguably the faces of the league right now. Of course, you're going to watch that. You could also add in the Canadian factor of Jamal Murray coming back and being an all star for them. I think that just is the difference for me. I think with this one, I guess from a hockey fan perspective, it's the Vegas thing where it's just yeah, of course they got it done because look how aggressive they were with every single move they did. I think it was Elliot, no, not Elliot Friedman. I think it was not Elliot Friedman. It was Kevin Bieksa where he talked about how there was that transition between the misfits that made it to the finals, quote
Hmm.
unquote, and having this team of what they said they're gonna try to win it in 6 years. They were so aggressive with the trades they did. We can question their player loyalty up until this point when it came to the big contracts, but I think that just was it. It's just kind of like, oh, like look, these teams kind of like went into it. So for me, it was just that aspect of like, what are you really kind of cheering for if you're not a fan of either team?
Yeah, I guess from a narrative standpoint, sure, maybe there wasn't a whole lot to watch for, but I think from, and maybe I don't know if I'm alone on this one or if you would agree or if other people would agree, but from a team, like from looking at the two teams and the way they play, I thought this was a really, really interesting standpoint because of not necessarily like I just look at the way they play, and maybe their systems aren't exactly the same, but they will grind you. They are, I think, and when Adam and I were talking about last episode, it was they are a pain in the ass to play against, and both of them are like that, and they're very similar in that sense. And to me, it was the question of who was going to be a bigger pain in the ass, or and listen, we now know about all the injuries. Who was the healthier team who was going to be the bigger pain in the ass? And I thought it would be Vegas. I think I said that last episode or two episodes ago. It turned out to be Vegas, but that doesn't take away from I think what Florida did through the playoffs. It was just constant like boom, and you could like time after time and time and time again running through the having to run get through those guys and then not even be able to get past Bobrovsky. But Vegas, man, were to me a completely different beast. While maybe their goaltending and listen, from a name perspective, Aiden Hill doesn't have the Sergei Bobrovsky Vezina pedigree, if that's what we want to call it. This was an absolute Cinderella story in terms of Aiden Hill. But everywhere else, it was boom, boom, line after line after line down to their fourth line. I think the depth that Vegas had is what put them over at the end of the day, put them over the Panthers in this series.
It's very interesting things. I remember on this pod, we used to always talk about all of those trades Vegas was doing to get players to dump cap and how we thought how heavy they were, like how top six heavy they were, how they had two or three defensemen they heavily relied on, and to really see that difference. I know that they did make moves again, but I really liked how more strategic they were this time. Ivan Barbashev is example like that. You talk about that two-way game, talk about a guy you could really put anywhere else in the lineup, and I think he's just an example of just smarter moves on Vegas's part. They were that juggernaut team that we expected them to be, but it was this time the complementary guys coming up. We didn't mention Jack Eichel yet. The resurgence of Jack Eichel.
Right.
Biggest weakness we talked about with Vegas is the center depth, and Jack Eichel really solidified that for them. Giving Chandler Stevenson, an opportunity to just play at his own pace. He's a good player, not a top line center, but
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of worked for them. One thing you did mention with Aiden Hill is it's funny because he was supposed to be this goalie in San Jose. Do you remember that when he left?
Briefly,
Not he
briefly.
left Arizona, where the Sharks were like, hey, we're going to try to roll with him. And then it just didn't work. And then they sold low on him for what, a fourth round pick to
Yeah.
Vegas
Yeah.
after trading like a second and a low tier prospect for him. And I kind of like that. We talk about depth. We talk about the goaltending they had there. Just they did everything they could. They had the insurance policies wherever they had to go. And I remember it was also in the first round. We were questionable, like, okay, did Mark Stone come back way too early for this? But he proved that he still played at an insanely high level. He proved that he can be the leader they needed. And for me, it was just a more cohesive Vegas team. I know there were still a lot of moving parts there, but it was a team that just came together at the right moment, that things just stuck. It wasn't just we're trying to get best player available possible and then put them somewhere on the team. It
Right.
felt more cohesive.
And well, it was a completely different approach. Like you said, like I think if you look at the moves that they made in years past, in terms of they really did go after best player available, getting Alex Petrangelo and moving out Nate Schmidt and more. Then going after Mark Stone and moving prospects, um, and then doing it again last season with Jack Eichel. They didn't take that approach this time around. They they took, okay, like let's create, like that bottom six is just a pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Ivan Barbashev, and I know Jeff Merrick, or I'm sure more than just Jeff Merrick, but I hear him say it the most, talk about that being the best trade deadline acquisition. And he's probably right in terms of the impact he's had on that team. And I heard him say like he loves it in Vegas. But man, if he goes to the open market, that guy is gonna make a lot of money. And it happens every year, right? Like we've
Yeah.
seen it in the past. Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, Kadri. It's really, really big examples. I don't know if he's going to get the high end of Nazem Kadri dollars, but he's gonna make his money because of the impact he made on the team. I want to go to Florida for a second. I go back to Florida again because obviously they had a really tough start to the season where they just had a load of injuries. And so they didn't have the greatest start to the season. We were talking about whether Montreal would have a top 10 pick with the pick that they own from Florida. And then they kind of made their way back up as people started coming back from
Yeah.
their injuries. Where do you think they go next year? Like listen, Matthew Tkachuk's here for forever, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing. They have, for the most part, an idea of their team that they really like. I'm just looking at their cap friendly right now. They have up front, they have three guys who are either UFAs or RFAs, which is Eric Stahl, Giovanni Smith, and Colin White. Up front, they're set. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
on the defensive end, and like listen, those guys had pretty good years. Do they bring back a guy like Radko Gudas? And what's next for the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, it's interesting because for me they had the weirdest 2 years. You
Right.
know, like they went from top of the division to barely making the playoffs, except it all mattered in the what happened in the postseason for them. So to be honest, I don't know. I actually don't know. Like I think that they had an excellent core for the postseason, but I want to see more of that consistency in the regular season for that to happen. I think they're a team that they're probably going to lose a few of these spare parts, but they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to replace them easily. I don't know. Like it's weird. Like we talk about like Eric Stahl of like where do you go from here from this guy's 38 years old now?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, do you still bring back that cheap depth, that embedded leadership that it's always invaluable to any team that wants to go on a run, or do you want to get younger? Does Colin White really kind of be viewed as that guy who was that reclamation project that came from Ottawa after he was bought out? Like, how much more do you want to bet on that? For me, I think it was just Radko Gudas might be the only guy in terms of just someone who's just been there since the turnaround for them, someone who's been very consistent of being that type of guy and being that player. I know he's getting a bit older for the way he's playing, especially. You bring it up. One thing I do know is, and we've talked about this before with Florida, is just betting on these guys that become amazing offensively. We talked
Right.
about Carter Higgy already. Talked about betting on Anthony Duclair, other guys who've left like Alex Venberg, just giving these guys opportunities and then figuring out what we could do with them. We could even say Ryan Lomberg as an example,
Mhm.
Mason Marchment as an example as well. So I think Billy Zito has an idea of what he wants to do with this team, and I don't think they have to break the bank necessarily again. Like a big, I don't think there's gonna be another Matthew Kachuk type of move coming, but I think
They
there's
don't
gonna
have
be
the
more.
capital for
Yeah,
that
they don't have the capital
either.
for that. Um, but I could see it the way it was 3 seasons ago of just getting these guys and giving them this type of low risk, high reward type of signing.
Now, I saw this floated on Twitter, and it was more so just a question, not a rumor or anything like that. Um, their goaltending situation. I guess we don't exactly know the situation with Spencer Knight at the moment, but we do know that Sergei Bobrovsky makes $10 million for 3 more seasons after this one. You're pro. I don't know what you're betting on with Alex Lyon. I guess he had a really good end of the season, and then eventually you had to pull him come the playoffs. He's 30 years old. He's a UFA. The question that was posed was, do the Florida Panthers trade Sergei Bobrovsky, and does he bring back, is he of positive value now after this run?
Oh, that's a good one. There's so many things on like different sides of that, right? Because like it's the
Right.
money, the age,
Yeah.
but it's also this like proven winner, proven guy that could. I always call him the giant killer. Like it just for me, it
Well,
just
not
that's what it
wrong.
is. Yeah, he's the giant killer in the playoffs, and it's weird. It's, like, it's for a team that is going to be contending, but it's like, are the Panthers willing to take back Cap for the next 3 seasons for that to happen?
Right.
Because where does that kind of leave them? Because we don't know what's going on with Spencer Knight. I don't trust. I don't think Alex Lyon's coming back. I forgot. Alex Baumgartner talked to us about that. The other prospect goaltender they just signed, and then he played a few games.
Uh,
Um, he's a European goalie. I
I
don't
don't
think that guy's
know.
quite ready to play for a bit, but yeah, I'll
I
look
don't
for the
know.
name. But he's a guy that I don't know what the long term approach is with that one. We're looking right now, like what the goaltending market is right now. Do you go and try to bet on it? Like I believe like Mackenzie Blackwood might not get a qualifying offer.
Right.
Is that a guy that another Billy Zito type of? Do you bet on this guy or
Hmm.
Tristan Jarry is probably not coming back to Pittsburgh? Is it another guy where it's like, okay, you had an up and down career so far. Let's try to get back on that up, at least for now.
Right.
So there are options they have with it, but I'm not worried about Florida. Like they've been able to get a lot out of their guys. I think Christopoulos talked about this. Like they were built on a team of guys that played beyond their contract value,
Hmm. And they have to
and
find that again.
yeah, they have to find that again.
No, that's a good point. Like I don't think they're gonna have trouble next year either. I think they shore up, and I think they shore up their back end a little bit, and you look at what they were missing compared to Vegas, and again, I'd still make the argument was depth, and if they can find those pieces, again, the Atlantic is already a nightmare, even with
Yeah.
them in it. If they shore themselves up, it continues to be a nightmare. So again, they're in a very, very tough division. Adding Matthew Kachuk as a solid piece of that core last season absolutely helped. Um, and we'll see what next year brings. Do you have anything else on either team or the cup final or the playoffs in general before we
Um.
move on?
Yeah. Two final points. I don't
Yep.
know. I really like the core in Vegas.
Yep.
They're gonna be able to run it back. More so as the team is. I
Under the
don't.
cap, obviously.
Yeah, under the cap, obviously. So maybe they'll like. I mean, like we say that's love. Like, there's no excuse for this team to kind of run it back and try to go for a back-to-back championship. We'll
Yeah,
see how that
they should.
goes. Um, Second point is, and you did mention it, it made me think about it with Florida, is the amount of injuries they have and trying to get these guys back into gel into the lineup, especially the right side on defense.
Right.
That might kind of plague them a bit of playing catch up again towards the end of the season. So we'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's been announced, like the timelines. I've seen the injuries and like just a ridiculous amount of injuries, and I think highlighted by Matthew Kachuk and his broken sternum in game four.
Yeah.
They were wild.
Aaron
I don't
Ekblad
know.
surgery.
Yeah, I don't. I and that maybe
Yeah.
you've seen it. I haven't seen the timeline. I haven't read anywhere about if anyone's missing the start of the season.
I know for sure Aaron Ekblad is missing training camp, and then
Mhm.
Brandon Montour's 3 to 4 months with his surgery.
So maybe I can't do so July. Yeah, maybe the speak very beginning of the season he'll miss. So I don't know. I think they'll be fine.
Be fine.
I think they'll be fine. That's just me.